This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hi, I'm Li Xueying, and you're listening to Letter from the Bureau. In this episode, ST's Hong Kong correspondent Magdalene Fung looks at the popularity of vanity car plates in Hong Kong and what they say about the city's obsessions. Good to have you on the show, Mag.
Thanks for inviting me.
Right, so Meg, you were recently well driven to write this piece about vanity car plates in Hong Kong. So for our listeners who don't quite know what that means, these are plates with customized letters and numbers on the car plates. Can you tell me a bit more about why you wanted to write about this?
So, I'll tell you about my very first encounter with vanity plates in Hong Kong first, and that was 12 whole years ago in 2012 when I just moved here to Hong Kong for work. So it was with another paper at that time. I was in my 20s. It was my first permanent job posting outside of Singapore. So this was a new city, new company, new culture. Everything was very exciting, but also scary in some ways. I remember, my first couple of months in the office, and it wasn't immediately easy to make new friends. So after a somewhat isolated day in the office, one day I was just walking home alone and rounding the bend at a hotel nearby when I saw this car parked outside. I think it was a black car, and the car plate, which was a custom-made one, said YNWA. So for football fans, especially Liverpool fans, you would definitely know what that stands for, YNWA. You'll never walk alone.
Right.
So I'm not even a football fan, but the refrain from that classic football anthem was at that brief low point in my life just felt like a very timely and reassuring reminder. So
Wow.
basically the lyrics go something like, though your dreams be tossed and blown, walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone, you'll never walk alone. So that
I think you're
experience,
appealing to our Liverpool fans right now.
or football
Yes,
fans,
and
just in general.
yes.
So that experience, it just made me realize that these vanity plates that you see on random cars out on the streets, they aren't just for vanity's sake alone. They can also become personally meaningful for anyone else who sees them and cares to interpret them for themselves. And I guess that was when my interest in vanity plates began.
I see. So have you been on a hunt since, spotting interesting vanity car plates out there on the streets of Hong Kong?
Well, I haven't been actively on the hunt, but because there are many of these plates, so every day just along the streets you might come across something, and if it interests you, you take a shot and share it online. So that's generally what people do here.
Right. So as you noted, these car plates are not just car plates, right? I mean, when they are customized in this way, like you said, they are imbued with a certain meaning. So can you tell me, from the car plates that you looked at over the last 12 years or so, what do they tell us about Hong Kong and what the people of Hong Kong care about? What kind of messages do you see blaring out from these car plates?
Well, these plates, they can tell you a lot of things or anything about Hong Kongers as a whole, or about the individuals who own these plates. So when, for example, you see car plates like "no cash" on a flashy Lamborghini, or "add oil" on a Tesla electric car that doesn't
Right.
even use oil, so you can hazard a guess about their owners' sense of humor, level of wealth, their motivations, beliefs, status, etc. Or sometimes they can also just be something very personal, like an inside joke for their owners alone, or like Ben and Karen, which is like maybe a couple, and it's almost like a physical and very public version of your computer passwords or your email usernames.
Right. And what kind of obsessions do they say about what Hong Kongers have? What kind of obsessions do they review?
Well, a segment of them might reveal, an obsession with wealth, maybe, because so if we look at this year's annual Chinese New Year auction in February, one vanity plate bearing just the letter D, it was sold for Hong Kong 20.2 million Hong Kong dollars, and so that's about like 3.5 million Sing dollars, basically equivalent to a price of a brand new like 700 square feet luxury apartment in Hong Kong. And the reason it fetched such a crazy price is apparently because the letter D can represent the words dragon, so we're in the dragon year, or dollar. So all these symbolize power, wealth, vitality, and auspiciousness in Chinese culture. So some vanity plates are definitely status symbols, I'd say. But of course, there are also other custom plates that can be a lot more affordable. So it starts from just Hong Kong $5,000, which is about Sing 860. So one very interesting vanity plate that I've personally seen is this plate that says Joy Sifu. Basically, that sounds like Cantonese for teacher or master Joyce. The car plate belongs to a Hong Kong driving instructor, and it's a great advertisement for her business because if you come across it on the streets, it's just so eye-catching and memorable. And when you snap a picture of that car with a plate to maybe share with your friends, you are basically also snapping a picture of her contact number that's on the car. So it's like this great walking advertisement, and you
I
only pay
see.
5,000 Hong Kong dollars for it. Yeah.
Right. So this is not just something that the rich Hong Kongers do, but you're saying that even your regular folks, they do cotton on to it as well. They use this as well.
Yeah, I say so, like the middle income folks lah. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I was also wondering if this is also related to, Hong Kongers' creativity when it comes to, unique English names. They're quite famous for that, and these are often seen as a form of individualistic expression, right? To stand out from the crowd, to be different from others. I was curious to know why you think that has been so, and as Hong Kong has changed in the last 10 years or so, do you see this desire to want to stand out from the crowd change in any way?
Okay, that's a great point. So Hong Kong, as we know, is one of those Asian cities long known for its creativity. It has quite a robust film industry, Cantopop music, fashion, and so on. So, well, maybe Hong Kongers' penchant for this type of individualistic expression comes from some innate need for the world to understand, or for them to tell the world who they really are deep inside and what they stand for. And maybe these desires and avenues for self-expression are also somewhat related to Hong Kong's ingrained protest culture. And if you ask me, have I seen this desire for self-expression shift in any
Yes.
way over the past 10 years? I think yes, to some extent there has been some shifts, though even if they are still subtle for the time being. So as you might know, the major annual protests of the past are no longer allowed or encouraged in Hong Kong now after all the chaos of the 2019 anti-government protests that eventually led to the imposition of the national security law. So that's one major outlet cut off for a whole body of Hong Kong people with this deep desire and ingrained culture of self-expression. And where do they take to now? One place is, of course, online. And because of the political climate and how society has become much more polarized since 2019, some forms of self-expression now have a result, I think, become a lot more covert, a bit underground, and often communicated on more secure or obscure platforms. And increasingly, not unlike in mainland China, they often use the transliterated
Quotes, right?
abbreviations, yes,
And quotes as well.
correct,
Yes.
to that they identify with lah. For example, GFHK SDGM. It sounds like a totally random string of alphabets, like gibberish basically. But if you type it into Google, you'll find out that this means 光復香港時代革命, which is Cantonese for Liberate Hong Kong Revolution of Our Times, which was a major rallying call during the protest back in 2019. So this is actually shortened to a very innocuous term, 光喜 or 喜光, depending on which way you read it. Devoid of context, it just means time or daylight hours in Chinese. But if you insert the term, say, into someone's bio on a dating app, for example, that could also serve to covertly communicate to others your political stance, basically an expression of who you are and what you stand for inside.
Right. And that does remind me of how the mainland Chinese would mark the Tiananmen incident of 1989, because of course, the numbers, for instance, 6489 would be banned on Chinese social media, and people would get around it by, using some other codes to sort of represent those same messages.
Yeah, correct.
Right. And actually that reminds me that coming back to car plates, there was the incident that you wrote about where there was a car plate in Hong Kong that was precisely the same, 6489, and that was actually stopped by the police authorities on the anniversary of the day. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, okay. So basically, that car plate, the actual number is US 8964. Okay, so first of all, I have to say that actually it was perfectly legit. And I mean, if it were not legit, it would not have been issued by the transport department in the first place. But it was just the whole context of the whole thing that led to the car being impounded. So what happened was on June 4th last year, 2023, it was the anniversary of China's 1989 Tiananmen crackdown, which, you know, Beijing has long been very sensitive about. And traditionally in past years in Hong Kong, there would typically be a humongous demonstration every year at Victoria Park and Causeway Bay. And then, you know, protesters would march to demand vindication of the bloody crackdown. But since 2020, the marches in Hong Kong have been banned. And so now there's just, on the day itself, there's just a very heavy police presence in the area to prevent any such gatherings from ever taking place again. So on that evening of June 4th, when the white Porsche bearing the plate US 8964 appeared in Causeway Bay, just minutes walk from Victoria Park, you know, is it any wonder that police would see it as something more than mere coincidence, especially when people, you know, were taking note of it, snapping pictures and stuff. So maybe it really was a coincidence. We might never know for sure, but the official reason given was that there was some minor unregulated modifications that were made to parts of the car and its license plate, and that was why it was impounded.
I see. Well, maybe to the license plate itself, there was a part that was modified. Okay. And do we know what happened to the car in the end?
No, actually, there's been no follow-up after that. And
right, okay.
Yeah.
Have there been other incidents where there were certain car plates that were customized and out of bounds for the authorities? Do they have guidelines for that?
Yes, they have. Actually, to my knowledge, I don't think they have issued plates that were, you know, later rescinded. But what happens is, so you have to apply for that you want this special vanity plate, and then it has to go through various rounds of approval first. And then if they approve, then you are allowed to bid for it.
I see. Okay.
Yes. So, you know, obviously, if you ask for some vulgarity, it's not going to. Yeah.
Right. So Matt, you returned to Hong Kong about 6 months ago as ST's correspondent there. And this was after, you know, coming back to Singapore for 4 years. And of course, before that, you were in Hong Kong for another 8 years. As we all know, Hong Kong has undergone so much change in the recent times, you know, from the first Occupy protest in 2014, then the second round in 2019. Then, of course, there was the COVID lockdown where it was quite hard for much of the population. And now, just in March, there was the Article 23 legislation that was passed. So can you tell me a bit more about your second stint now in Hong Kong? How does it compare with that, you know, when you went 12 years ago? And what has been the biggest change that you've noticed about Hong Kong society so far?
This time that I've come back, you know, after 2019 protests, after COVID, I would say that many regular Hong Kongers seem very downbeat about Hong Kong economy and their future here in the city now. And because, you know, when I returned in October, and that was probably the time when I felt it the most acutely, because just coming back, it was like so different from the Hong Kong that I was familiar with back then. So there felt like just this very pervasive sense of pessimism among many of the locals that I've spoken with, though I would say that they still go about daily life quite stoically. Okay, so I'll say, okay, when I moved back to Singapore at the start of 2020, that was at the time when the 2019 protests were just starting to lose momentum. I would say that the general sentiment of the Hong Kong I left back then could still be described as kind of very visible, bubbling anger. So at the time, it felt like that. But despite the anger, people still felt more empowered to make a difference around them, whether for better or for worse. Now it's more like the sentiment feels quite sullen, I'd say, seething. Maybe the people feel more disempowered and deeply yet silently unhappy about it.
I see.
And among Hong
and-
Kongers,
Right. No, and that is for much of the society, or is it for just certain demographic groups?
Well, definitely there are different segments lah. Let's say, I think among Hong Kongers, the older ones tend to feel like life is harder. Money has been more difficult to earn, say for the real estate agents, shop owners. Regular things like food and groceries have become more expensive due to inflation, and they seem to be more worried for their livelihoods and their younger generation these days. Then there's the younger people. I think one segment of the younger people are undergoing a severe mental health crisis. Suicide rates here have risen sharply in recent years, actually among both young and old. And every day there are some news alerts that alert you of another case. So yes, there's been a lot of negativity in media reports, especially Western ones, on Hong Kong's narrowing space for its freedoms, as well as on local online forums where people are just very negative. But at the same time, there has also been a lot more positivity, I say, or attempts at framing things more positively from the official sources. So like recent figures in the past months have shown that economy is looking up, the property market is starting to pick up again, some tourists are returning, etc. So from my point of view, I think Hong Kongers now are actually placed daily in this position where they actually have the freedom to consciously decide for themselves whether they want to see their glass as half empty or half full. That's just my point of view.
Right. And for those who do want to see their glass half full, what is the vision of the future that they can see? What is this Hong Kong of the future that they feel optimistic about?
Well, one line that has been touted a lot is that, Hong Kong remains a very strong gateway to China, and so that if they solidify their connections, business connections, economy, etc. with China, then people from around the world outside of China are still coming, trying to do business with China via Hong Kong. And I think part of Hong Kong is kind of like using this as a platform to help Hong Kong as an economy and society improve. And this is what I would say a lot, one segment of Hong Kongers still believe. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess if coming back to a car plate issue, we might be seeing some car plates that say Hong Kong at all, or China go. I mean,
I'm sure there are some, yeah.
Right. Okay. And if you yourself get to choose a plate that you would like to have, what would that be?
Well, I spent some time thinking about it, but
You have.
unfortunately, I can't drive and don't have a car. So
Right.
yeah, but I did see a plate that I kind of liked. It says Dreamer, and it was on a Beetle, if I'm not wrong. I thought it was very cute and a bit quirky and artistic. And yeah, I thought I wouldn't mind owning that plate and car.
Well, let's hope that Hong Kong continues to dream. And thank you for coming on the show today, Meg.
Yes, thank you, Xueying.
Thank you. Well, that's a wrap for Letter from the Bureau. If you would like to read Magdalene's column, we have a link in our podcast show notes. You will also find a link to other articles in our Letter from the Bureau series.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.